Hello and welcome to another episode of the Revenue Revolution podcast, sponsored by Jointflows. And today we have the privilege of being joined by Jacob Buckland, VP of Sales at Ometria, who I know from my former life as well. Jacob, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello, hello. I'm all good, thanks, gents. How are you getting on?
Not bad, not bad. Do you want to talk a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, sure. So, like Hitesh said, know him from a previous life. We worked at Yieldify together, which is how we're connected. But so I'm originally from Norfolk. After I left university, I went into sort of venture capital, trying to start my own company. Um, really crashed and burned in a way that all young people should. Then went and joined a startup called 10 to 8, which we built sort of over that 5 years I was there. It was then acquired, moved on to working at Yieldify with Hitesh, and we enjoyed ourselves there. I had a great journey within sort of 12, 14 months of being at Yieldify. We were then acquired by Epsilon Publicis Group, and now I'm over at Ometria as the VP of Sales, hopefully delivering in the same way for the team.
There you go. They must have bought him in so they can get quiet. Seems like he's
Wow.
got a pattern, this lad. All right, awesome. Well, look, we spoke before we hit the record button as well. I know one of the things that you're particularly interested in at the moment is around demand gen as well and what you're seeing in the market. Be interesting to get your view. We're quite fortunate because we get to speak to people from all types of companies doing the podcast as well, and they
Yeah.
all have different types of views of what they're seeing and what they're putting in place to overcome the barriers they're facing. So, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so I think no different to like what a lot of other people are seeing. We're seeing diminished returns from your outbound units in general in regards to email reply rates, LinkedIn reply rates. On the flip side of that, I'm actually seeing slightly higher connection rates, but in general, getting the right data isn't necessarily always super easy. So as a whole, I think that the model that we were built on maybe 5, 10 years ago doesn't work quite as well. And we're seeing this sort of new delivery of kind of what I'm loving from you guys at the minute, which is this, content-led approach. How do I build myself um, as more of a consultant in the industry that sort of has a software company or sell software? But that's difficult. How do you scale that, I guess, is the question at the minute. How do you scale that to a BDR team? How do you scale that to an AE team? And that's probably the biggest issue that I'm seeing right now from sort of leaders of demand gen is it's all well and good doing it at the founder level because you've got the expertise, you've got the network, you've got the knowledge. How do you do that from a day one graduate? How do you take them to being a content leader without it just being content for content's sake? So they're probably some of the challenges that I think that we're seeing.
Yeah, and so I think there are topics around quality versus volume versus value.
Yeah.
Like to me, what really works well is timing. When you do prospection, it's just about timing, and
Yeah.
I think timing beats value and beats volume every
Yeah.
single day. So in a competitive space like Ometria evolves into, how do you manage timing? And I guess the same for Yieldify. Like it's very
Yeah.
space.
It depends on the maturity of the market. So in the example of Ometria, in a mature space where you've got CDP, now CDXP, or you've got data platforms even previous to that, everybody has a level of incumbent. Maybe slightly different to Jointflows in the way where you're saying we have everybody works with a Marsis or Bloomreach, especially at the target market that we've got in the mid-market to enterprise space. There is no business that doesn't have it as of yet. Even when, on the smaller side, we're looking at Klaviyo as an example, they're really sweeping up on the SMB side. Now, in terms of the right timing, for me, it's about building the database. It's a more of a RevOps question than anything, which is quite dull, around how big's your TAM in each specific geography. Within those TAMs, how many of those accounts do you have the contract renewal dates for, and how long is your sales cycle in the run up, and how long is the client buying process in the run up? Knowing that and making sure you're timing that efficiently. But alongside that, also making sure that you've got consistent touch points over the year. So Ometria, we run a lot of events. Those events aren't necessarily just for a demand gen perspective in regards to, oh, are you buying right now? But it's a case of, well, when you are buying, are you going to bring us to the table because you know us as a business well, and we're trustworthy, and you know that we release high quality. But alongside that, you have to have the sort of underpinning of understanding when their buying process is, so you can be proactive rather than always reactive. Because I would love to be inbound all the time, but it doesn't necessarily work like that.
Yeah, of course. And so what you said a few interesting things there. So one of the things you mentioned is when it's the right time, you're going to bring this to the table, right? So a lot of that is a combination of perhaps the SDR, BDR, or the AE,
Yeah.
depending on how you set up
Yeah.
as a business. How do you stay at the front of the mind of your prospects? What can you do, on the daily, on the weekly? What should you be doing?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm seeing sort of right now in the market is being face to face with clients is now more powerful than it has been in a long time. I hate using the COVID word, but I think when people lost that, now that it's back, people are really affable to going to lunches, coffees, connecting with their market, as long as they know they're not going to get the hard sell. I think they're quite keen to connect with other people within the industry. And then it goes to, we then do that rolling into events. And those events don't have to be big. Those events can be, a luxury lunch, dinner. That can be just connecting with other people around the table, providing value. And it kind of goes to what Mick was saying, right? Like the timing and the quality of the content that you're giving the prospect is almost more important than anything. And that's how you stay top of mind, because you're a trusted source rather than necessarily being someone that is just like, this person's trying to give me the hard sell every time I speak to them. And now I'm a bit concerned about that. Sort of tarnished my view of Ometria. We're trying to position ourselves as consultants, as the people that are trustworthy in the industry. You want to come to our events because it's going to be worthwhile. You want to go for the coffees. You want to be connected with other people that we're connecting you with. So that's really how you sort of build the ecosystem, and then try and make sure that you're top of mind when they are going through RFP, or when they are thinking about another vendor, or maybe they've outgrown an incumbent or something similar.
Yeah. And so are you guys doing more face-to-face events now as well then?
Yeah, more face to face than I think I've ever done at all, to be honest with you. Obviously I'm very new at Ometria, but
yeah,
I think we're encouraging it even more than perhaps we used to. Hitesh, you remember at Yieldify, we're slightly more mid-market in our sale, but it was transactional in some ways, where it was sometimes quite difficult to get out to the clients with the amount of deal flow that we were working. Ometria is slightly less deal flow, and we're really focused on specific geographies. So specifically focused in UK and Ireland, within my remit as an example. And as a result of that, we can spend a lot of time face to face with our accounts. That's really important, because it just helps us build the relationships, help us build the trust. I think trust is massive in this market. If you can build that, then you're onto a bit of a winner, because at least they're going to pick up the phone when you do make those dials or you do send that email.
Yeah, one of my old managers used to say to me back pre-COVID, make sure your expenses are high. So I know you're doing your job right. So if you're reporting into Jacob.
Yeah, exactly.
Jacob, we spoke about timing, but we also spoke about content. And what we tend to see is that sometimes content is more like it's seen as a marketing activity as opposed to a sales activity.
Yeah.
Where do you feel like content should reside?
It's a really good question, and something that I haven't actually been able to nail thus far. So everything I'm speaking from here is a little bit, from what I'm testing right now. I think having a repository of content and having content that can be repurposed from the marketing team is really important. I think the marketing team delivering a case study or a white paper or a 15-minute video, right, has very little value. I think what does have value is the marketing team using their voice to produce content that can be cut into 40 different pieces and can be repurposed into short, digestible content by the market, which salespeople can then comment on and sort of help build their brand, but then also make it correct for the market that they're connected with. So that's really the way I think the best way to work it is. We're only just really starting that, and I'm only really just starting that journey. So whether that's the right way to do it, I think it is from the people I've seen be successful with it, but I'll have to get back to you if the results are actually what we want it to be.
Yeah. We are building our own content, which we put into our sequences.
Yeah.
So the sequences we spoke about this on the last episode, but there's part of it which is kind of trying to get to the right timing, and then the second part is really about building credibility and authority on the market.
Yeah, definitely. I think the authority is an interesting one, isn't it? Because what it does is it allows you to have a conversation which isn't just structured around Jointflows or isn't just structured around Ometria. It allows you to go and speak to a decision maker, and they'll come to you and they'll ask you a genuine question about a problem that they're having. And the way you solve that doesn't always have to be with the software that you're providing. And then you're in a situation that when you do come to the table and you do say, you know, are you looking at changing right now? They're at least going to give you an honest answer, which for me is, you know, I always used to say to Hitesh and the team is that we work in yes and no's, we don't work in maybes. Whereas I think a lot of salespeople are very comfortable with maybes, and as a result of that, they don't form the connection, don't build the trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, I think you mentioned at least if I heard correctly, about individuals building their brand as well.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in that now more than ever. So if you don't have a presence and a brand within LinkedIn, for example, or you know even your other social media platforms, you're going to find it hard. And I've seen very, very successful SDRs who have a huge presence on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You know, they'll do a post and they'll get like 5,000 likes. And I'm
Yeah.
with like, I don't do it for the likes, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not getting 5,000 likes. What's your view on that? Because it's quite different. I guess it's become more prominent in the last 18 to 24 months, more so now. But what's your view on that, building your own brand, and how should you go about doing that?
It's a really good question, I think, as much as anything, because I think if we break it down as to brand, I think it's good to inform why, right? So if we go all the way back to being an SDR, right, and then we'll sort of go through to founder level in terms of the why, because I think they're very, very different. The why I think it's important to build brand as an SDR is because it makes you incredibly employable, right? If you have an immediate audience that knows your name and you can, as you move around the world and change companies and move to an AE, you have got a brand that you can speak about and you can engage with people on that's not in their busy email inbox, their LinkedIn inbox, you know, giving them a call, hi, have you heard of XYZ company? It allows you to really open that sort of that box up a lot more. And I think that's massively important. Going into sort of management C-suite level, I think the thing is important around building brand is like, what are you trying to achieve, right? Let's use the example of yourselves. Are you building a brand around your function? Are you building a brand around what you're good at and how you're operating in the daily market? Or are you building a brand around being an expert within your industry? They could actually be two very, very different things. So for me, as an example, I could try and build a brand around retail, e-commerce, and those sorts of things, and being sort of a thought leader in that. Or do I build a brand around being a VP of sales within a software company? The audiences and the markets are entirely different. And I think that people can often get caught up in doing too much of branding around their function and not enough branding around their market. But that really depends on how long you're going to be in that market for. An SDR may move around, which is why I think it's okay to do it, you know, very, very personally. But for example, for you guys or for me or for Ivan, our CEO, if we're going to be in the game for 5-10 years in this very specific market, should we not build the brand around our market and trying to build an ecosystem that's, you know, built around the company, well, us, but being an expert in that company rather than just this is my function and these are the things I see. So I think it's definitely something you have to be quite careful with, because if not, you end up in that situation where you're neither either or and you're not really appealing to anybody.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm following the CEO of retention.com on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen him, but he's building in public a little bit like we do. And he explained that he started posting on LinkedIn on a daily basis only recently. And he's marketing, where he's building his brand around the market as opposed to his function.
Yeah.
But the market is not necessarily on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So he said, well, look at my turnover, it's tripled, or I don't know what the number is. Just
I remember this post actually.
Unreal, crazy. Jacob, 3 times acquired. Some people like me struggle to get acquired once. you do it back to back 3 times. Like, what's the do you have a blueprint you could share with me?
Yeah, I wish. I think first things, I've never been a founder. So I've never been a real acquired founder. So I think you have to look at people like, you know, I know we all used to work for Jay Radia. You have to look at Jay. You have to look at the Waleeds. You have to look at Matthew Cleveley, Richard Hills that I used to work for. You know, they're the real people in this scenario. Like they're the people that were there on day one and day acquisition. So for them, they put their sort of blood, sweat, and tears into those companies. I just sort of helicopter in. I think for me, there is a bit of a blueprint around a business which is looking to run a hygienic company. So what I mean by hygienic is actually something one of my old CEOs, Matthew, shared with me. He says it's always, if you can run a hygienic house, then you're always going to be a company that can be packaged up and sold quite quickly. So, what's your acquisition cost at? What's your LTV at? What's your net retention at? Can you package those things up and make sure that all of those are moving in the right direction, even if they're moving slowly? And can you have a really solid plan about how you can get them into a market leading position? And I think if you can do those things and deliver on them, you're a very acquirable company, right? Because you've got metrics moving in the right direction, you're in the right space at the right time, and it almost doesn't matter if you get acquired or not, because if let's say, Mick, if you were looking to acquire me at Ometria and you were saying, hey, we think this is a great company, I say, well, that's great, but are you the right acquirer? Because we'll march on either way, right? We march on either way because we've got a very healthy business and we don't need to get acquired in a fire sale. I see some companies that getting acquired for not a huge amount versus where they once were, and I think a lot of that is because maybe when you lose the hygiene, have you got your cost structure even in your department? I'm talking from very, very specific around sales, services, demand gen, etc. Is the cost of your department in line? Do you have those really structured? Because more often than not, in a startup, nobody's going to come to you and say, hey, Jacob, here's your really clear budget, here's your really clear, RevOps fees, here's your hiring costs, and lay it all out for you, and you just have to stay below the lines. You have to make sure that you've structured that correctly. You have to make sure that you've organized that. So I think for me, I wouldn't say that's the recipe, but I think that's definitely something you should do. And every CEO that you go and work for, starting your own company as an example, VC firm will appreciate. So it may not be the right secret sauce for growing a business on that massive hockey curve, because I know you've got to spend money to make money, but in this market especially, I think that sort of model is going to take you a long way.
Yeah, I think you've made a few great points there. It kind of segues into that sustainable growth versus growth at all costs, right? And
yeah,
what we're seeing now is, a lot of people who were on growth at all costs, and shit's hit the fan a little bit for them. And they're trying to figure a way out. Some people are really good at it and they have figured a way out. And then there's those, as you said, who are very hygienic and been growing sustainably. And, yes, the market, is a little bit tough right now, but they're okay, because they've done well to get to where they are sustainably. What do you think you can do as a man who's worked across a few companies who have been acquired, if you were in growth at all cost mode, and now you hit to this position where we are today? What strategy do you take? Because it's very difficult. We're seeing obviously people get laid off. You've got to balance the books. So is there anything you think, maybe not a silver bullet, but 2 or 3 things that you think can really help?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's worth mentioning is that the old sort of methodology around outbound doesn't work the way it used to. Sort of get a level of product market fit, raise a big round, throw 100 salespeople at it, because it's very measurable. Like, I don't think that works in the way that you're used to. For me, it's in that situation, make sure you're very aware of who your high performers are. Make sure that you're measuring outcomes, not inputs. Don't get me wrong. I think when you're on a journey, it's important to measure things like activity, because you need to get people in the rhythm of doing that. But you need to measure meetings held, calls connected, opportunities created. Who are your individual people that are creating that? Keep your team nice and lean, but make sure that you are looking after your top performers. Make sure your top performers are always aligned and you're getting things out of their way. Super important. Even if that means that you do have to make some tough decisions around laying people off. I think right now, if you've got a 10-person outbound team, of which 3 or 4 are producing all the results, I don't know if in this current market you'll be able to turn that around. Personally, I think you'd be better off moving to 3 or 4 reps and really optimizing them for growth and consistent and organic growth. I think alongside that, on the AE side, it's going to be making sure that you're getting your pound of flesh from the clients. A lot of people are looking for discounts at the minute. A lot of people are saying, well, it's very competitive, trying to drive the price down. That's the reality of the world that we live in. That's okay. But if you're going to do that, then I always expect my AEs to get something in return. Is that a 3-year deal? Is that marketing opportunities? Is that some way to partner? Is that referrals? You know, never give something without taking something in return, and that those things compound. And then, like you said, Hitesh, and as we always used to talk about when you and I used to sit down and say what we're going to do next, I always just say there are no silver bullets, right? It's incremental growth. It compounds over time.
Yeah.
Making sure that you're doing very, very small things incrementally is going to deliver. Those people that just put their hands up and say, I'm all in on this one setup, and are not willing to change the course in a very, very small way every single day, I think you're just going to struggle, versus people that are maybe have a plan, but are willing to deviate from that plan in really, really small ways to get to the intended outcome.
Nice.
And consistency, because I think this is one of the keywords as well, which get forgotten quite a lot nowadays. You have to maintain the effort to be able to actually read anything from it.
Yeah. And that's the really difficult thing. And I think one of the things that you guys will see as you build your teams out is that you spend a lot of time as a sales leader being a cheerleader, right? So I am a massive cheerleader for my team. Is you have to put the face on, you know, on that Monday morning kickoff, even if you're like, it's the end of quarter, I'm tired, I spent 5 hours working on Sunday to try and, you know, you still have to turn up and be a massive cheerleader, because that's what helps people be consistent and disciplined. And that's the job that I think, some of the things that I think VPs sometimes miss out on, is that they impart some of their negative feeling onto their reps, and as a result, that's difficult culture-wise to keep them consistent.
Yeah, that's a good topic on coaching and motivation, which I don't think sales leaders are necessarily taught, like psychology and things like that. Just one question around blueprints. When you join in a business and do your initial diagnosis, like how much of it is tactical versus strategic?
Quite a lot. I think when I'm looking at the company I'm going to join, it's actually a lot more basic than that, to be honest with you. It's from my side, do I believe, you know, if I'm joining as a VP, do I believe in the CEO is always the first one. Do I believe that this is the right CEO to take us to the end goal? Even if I don't agree with the way they do everything in the business, fundamentally, do I believe that they are the right person to take this to the right place? One of the main reasons I joined Ometria was because of Ivan. I really believed in the way that he, you know, is running Ometria. So I think, yeah, you could say that's maybe more strategic than tactical. I think tactical comes once you're in the weeds of it, because it's hard to say how you're tactically going to implement anything until you're there. Once you're there, you can, you know, once you're on the battlefield, you can say, right, this is how we're going to do things. You can be strategic and make a strong plan, but tactically, I think it's hard to make decisions before you understand the business well. The way that I would have thought that I was going to run my sales unit at Ometria, you know, going into the job is probably completely different as to how it will end up being. So I think probably more strategic as to why I'm joining a company. Is it a bit more high level? Is it going to help me reach my goal? And then tactically is a bit more like when I'm in it, boots on the ground, once I've made my call and sort of set my stall up.
Yeah, I agree. And what do you look at? So like 3 months in, what are the metrics that you look at to influence to start with?
Yeah, I think I always do a bit of analysis and try to make sure that certain things are moving in the right direction. So for my AEs, is my if you are a business like Ometria trying to push average ACV up, is average ACV, is win-loss ratio, is deal lifetime, what we call like deal rotting, right? So is your average life cycle of a deal squeezing down, or if it's elongating, where are those deals getting stuck in those specific parts? Getting into detail, I would then like to reduce that slightly over time. If you've got 4 stages and 1 stage is busy, I will then try to make sure that we're reducing the time that it stays in that stage. For demand gen, it's making sure that from a success rate basis, are we getting the right amount of connects? Are we getting the right amount of replies on any given forms of outbound? Are we producing enough content? Are we attending enough events? All of those then feed into, you know, meetings held, opportunities created, pipeline created, and deal outcome. I think if you're looking almost like a funnel and you're managing all of those things at any one time, you will get the pipeline created goal, you will get the revenue goal. But if you don't look at those pieces beforehand, even at 90 days, you're going to end up looking around saying, God, I'm not sure what I missed here to make me miss the number. If I miss the number, I can tell you what is the input that resulted in me missing the number.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, that always means that I can wake up every single day and say, I'm very, very specific about what I've got to do right now.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you mentioned, deals elongating as well, getting a bit longer. What strategies are you putting in place for your team to help with this?
Yeah, it's a really tough one, to be honest with you, because we've now got more people in the buying cycle, right? So we're seeing more CFOs, more CTOs, more, especially as you move up the revenue side of things into the sort of enterprise, you're going to be speaking to a lot more stakeholders. Those marketers probably aren't holding quite the same budget they were. That budget now sits in another department because businesses are trying to tighten the purse strings. So for me, it's understanding the buying process that the business has, and then therefore how efficiently can we move through that buying process. Saying that we just want to squeeze our deal time, I think doesn't really benefit anyone, because how can you create urgency in a space where someone already has the urgency, but they just have internal blockers that are stopping them delivering on getting that deal done? So from my perspective, it's really saying, okay, well, what are the blockers that this person is facing? How can we as a team understand their buying process really, really clearly and clear the way for our champion to get to a position to help them get the deal done? Because they want, if you're in a situation where they're willing to buy, they want to buy as a champion, it's your job to help them navigate their company and navigate their buying process to get the deal done. So that's how I think we can squeeze the deal cycle, and that helps me avoid things like discounting, helps me avoid shorter contracts and those sorts of things, because you're in a bit of a race to the bottom if that's the case, because a buyer is just going to say, if you say, hey, if you don't sign by X day, you're not going to get this 20% discount, and they've already gone to their decision maker and tried to secure the funding for it, and then because they're 2 days late, they can't make that purchase anymore. Is that necessarily a good thing for them? Is it a good thing for us? Is it a good thing for anyone? It sort of leaves a very bitter taste. So you've got to be careful, and I think helping navigating the buying process earlier on is going to help you get those deals done before end of queue.
Yeah, and the more you understand it as well, the less slippage you should get as well.
Theoretically, yeah.
Once again, if you're reporting into Jacob, that's going to make him look good. So, accurate.
I need it.
Well, I'm not gonna place my product right here, but let's move on. And Jacob, we speak a lot with our other guests about deal management versus sales methodology. Like we speak the deal management, I speak deal management language, and it seems like you're speaking about deal management more than sales methodology.
Yeah.
Where does sales methodology start and then ends versus deal management?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think sales methodology for me underpins the way you do things. It's not actively how you do it on a day-to-day basis, right? So sales methodology, Medpick as an example, Medpick is a good tool to have a structure where everybody's speaking the same language, but it's not the way that you get deals done. You don't win a deal well because you Medpicked it well, right? It helps you identify where things are going wrong. It allows you to speak to the same language to the people internally to then help you get that deal over the line so you can all speak. So I think it underpins it, and it's important to have sales methodology, I think, underpinning the way that you operate as a team. I'm quite a big, Medpick guy, but I'm more psychology methodology than I am sales methodology. I think sales methodology becomes outdated very, very quickly. Let's look at BANT, right? It's only a few years ago I was still using BANT, but I wouldn't dream of using BANT now because it just doesn't work. You just don't get enough time with the prospects. I think the challenger sales model kind of works, like within reason, but I will always stress to my reps, there's certain books that I think you should be if you're going to read books, I would read certain psychology books rather than reading sales books, because that's going to help you understand people, help you understand your buyers, and as a result help you sort of form a more solid sales methodology as a result of that, rather than just sort of saying, hey, go and, I don't know, do these 3 things and you'll be a sales wizard, because I don't think that works.
Yeah. And you mentioned that like you just don't get enough time with prospects, right? So you were talking about like BANT, for example. And I know, every AE wants to have as qualified an offer as possible from the
Yeah.
SDR, right, when they get it. What can an SDR do? Because you're right? So to give you a bit of context, like Mick and I, we're hitting the phones, right? So we're making calls, give me 30 seconds of your time.
Yeah.
If I like it, I won't call you back. It's a cold
Yeah.
call, and it's fun. It's we're having a good time doing it and the results are good. So that's all good. But what are you looking for from an SDR to give to your AEs, and how can they go about getting it in such a short period of time?
Yeah, so a lot of this will depend on how big your market is and how many accounts you've got. In Ometria, they call it the capsule, but in your patch, right? So how many accounts have you got in the patch? Is it a free-for-all in the space? But the thing that you can always do is, as an SDR, if you're well researched into the account and you can have buying indicators. So those buying indicators could be, I spoke to them, they mentioned that they're not very happy with the incumbent. I asked them, some old school sales questions like, out of 10, how happy are you with this vendor? They gave me a 7. I found out these really key pain points. These are the things that they actually wanted to speak about before getting into a demo. Based on what I've seen, this account person, feeds into this person. There is very, very vague forms of BANT there. You can see it sort of very, very vaguely. But I think if you can have a structure which is built around your ICP, so not BANT, because BANT doesn't work everywhere, but it could be some other criteria of qualification, and a solid understanding of the account, you're going to enable that AE to have a much more fruitful conversation. Because I think I was listening to another podcast where they were interviewing someone from Outreach, and they were sort of saying, Outreach is now more platform than it is sort of sales tool. And as a result of that, you don't want to demo the whole product on the first meeting and go through everything under the sun. You want to speak to their pain points. And the earlier your BDR can nail down those pain points, I think the better enabled that AE is going to be to get into a sales process and qualify that up.
Yeah, we had an AE, Jacob and I, who was notorious for hating the handovers he'd get from SDRs. So if you are listening, take note.
Yeah, please do. And tell him to get on the phone as well.
Jacob, so we are passionate about deal slippage, and to me, there are 2 ways to be what we call predictable, but to stop deals from slipping. The first one is you can predict when the deal will close very early on, so you don't change the close date, and then the deal doesn't slip. The second thing is you can make sure you close the deal before that close date happens. So it's more like an efficiency play.
Yeah.
How much focus should be on forecasting versus building efficiencies?
Good question. I think that depends on your role. I think the AE role, and even as you get up into sort of more junior management, it's all about building efficiencies, right? Like, you're trying to get deals done. Whereas for me, I can't go to the Ometria board, right, and say, hey, I'm building efficiencies, so my forecasting is always out. They can't do that. You can't. That's unreasonable. They're trying to understand where this business is going so they can make very strategic decisions. So me being good at forecasting and making sure that my reps are forecasting correctly is good. However, when we're down at, when I'm working with the AEs, when I'm working with my team, in the trenches, as I like to call it, in that situation, we have to be concentrating on efficiencies. We have to be concentrating on how we actually going to get this deal done before the close date. How do we get to the end goal as soon as reasonably possible and with the best outcome for the client? If we can do that, then the close dates will fix themselves, and then you let me worry about it. I think by trying to get reps to worry about forecasting in that way, we're stopping them getting on with selling and doing what they need to do to deliver to the business. That's my job to take that off their plate. So my job to forecast and my job to help them with efficiencies, their job just to find efficiencies.
That's refreshing. It's the first time we actually have someone from sales leadership saying this eloquently. It's usually like, well, no, they should know their business. They should know when the deal will close. And then 5 minutes later is, well, it's actually impossible to know when the deal will close. There's so many people involved on the other side. Like, which one's which? You tell me,
Yeah, exactly. They just get lambasted at end of queue, not sleeping. I've seen Hitesh's bags under his eyes a few times, to be fair, end of quarter.
We had some great quarters.
We did,
I don't want listeners to get confused. Jacob, it's been great having you on. We do have a bit of a wrap up traditional question that we ask everyone, which typically is a bit of a thinker for most of our guests. But if I know Jacob, he's going to quickly answer it because it's always at the forefront of his mind. But throughout your whole career, what is the best memory that you have to date? And it doesn't have to include me, it's fine.
Best memory I've got to date. I think for me, the best memory that I have is the current head of sales at 10 to 8 actually was someone that I hired in as an AE. So for me, when I left and they didn't really run a hiring process because we knew that we'd already found the right person and that I had found the right person to take my role, was probably the most satisfying thing that I've ever had in my career. And I think in general, if I was to look back on like the best parts of my career thus far, it would be where the moments where the BDRs have become the AEs, you know, the AEs have become the sales directors. For me, that's like a massive win, because then when they come and speak to you further down the line in their career and they're like a top performing AE or a top performing manager or a founder, as an example, a CRO, then you're in a situation, it makes you feel good, right? Because you've had some really solid impacts, and fundamentally their success is your success, right? I only make money when they make money, and their success, you know, is sort of, it benefits me more than anything. So I think if I had to call out one, that would probably be it.
Well, there you go. See, I knew he'd answer it really quickly. He answered a true leader, enabling others and nothing about himself. Awesome. Well, look, that is everything. It's been really great having you on the show, Jacob. Really appreciate the time. This has been another episode of the Revenue Revolution podcast, sponsored by Jointflows. Until next time.
See you later. Thank you.